Mark Perry.
All right.
What an honor.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
The
Yeah.
most qualified
Well,
waterman around.
been at it for a while. That's all.
That's right. I'm surprised you didn't bring like a jar of muddy water. man.
I have it on the car if you want it. But,
Yes.
and it's right over here in the river.
Yeah. So we know. Yeah.
We know
We
it's
can
there.
see it right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the current state of the river with the discharges now? What's hot? What's top of mind for you? What do you think people need to know about, need to be thinking about?
Well, it's because we're into this third discharge schedule, a 14-day discharge schedule, and it's just not acceptable. I mean, they're damaging discharges to the estuary from the lake, putting too much water not only in our estuary but over on the west coast and the Caloosahatchee as well. And since they started this in February 17th, we knew it was going to be damaging right from the get-go, because not only our local basin runoff, but now you add all the lake in, we're way above the recovery metrics and everything that says, hey, this is damaging to the estuary. And why is that? It's just the pure fact that the salinity will change to freshwater conditions in the estuary. And as we show here on the graph, if you get that freshwater conditions for too long, for a duration, it'll start killing the oyster reefs and seagrass beds and in the outer estuary, and be devastating to everything that's around us, even in the outside on the reefs offshore, in near shore St. Lucie Inlet State Preserve Reef. So, I mean, those are critical habitats in this ecosystem we call our St. Lucie River estuary and Indian River Lagoon. So we're literally destroying those habitats. As kind of you mentioned, oysters filter water, and the filtration that the oysters do on a regular basis helps to keep the water clean, and it helps to provide habitat for over 300 species of little crabs and shrimp and other animals. So we don't want to destroy these habitats because they're functioning, their ecological functions are benefit to us and to the estuary, and to keep it clean. But we've somehow gotten into this position where, oh, gee, the lake's too high, and now we have to discharge it. And the only outlets we have that are practicable for them now are east and west. Mm-hmm. They should be sending this water south, which in nature intended it to do from the very beginning.
Why technically are they not? Because that's for the people who don't do this
all the time,
every day, that this is not the world they're in. That it seems like it's simple, send it south. What are the obstacles?
Yeah. So as we kind of developed our system for flood control back in the 1930s, basically the turn of the century, we wanted to drain the swamp and control the flooding around the lake. And the two hurricanes that came across in the late 20s killed many people around the lake. And so the Herbert Hoover Dike was authorized to build this dike around the lake. Well, they were literally building a dam that stopped the flow of water from the Kissimmee chain of lakes, the upper Kissimmee, all the way down into Lake Okeechobee, and then Lake Okeechobee flowed south very slowly through a shallow 1 foot deep, 1.5 feet deep river of grass. And this 100 mile long, 30 mile wide river of grass was now dammed off. It was interrupted. And instead, we shunted the water out to the east, to the St. Lucie estuary through a canal, and to the west through a canal connecting the Caloosahatchee River. And then used those outlets as the managing outlets primarily to get rid of the water in the lake when it gets too high. The problem is they also should be sending it south. Well, they are restricted in how much they can send south, because south of the lake, what developed in that riverbed, if you will, is the Everglades agricultural area. This 700,000 acres south of Lake Okeechobee, and is primarily farmed with sugarcane. And sugarcane likes its very laser level crop. It keeps the water table 28 to 32 inches below the roots of sugarcane for ideal conditions. And that's the way they keep it drained and keep it perfectly suitable for that crop, at the expense of now you have to put all this water through the stormwater treatment areas, the man-made marshes that we had to build to treat the water, and to send that south to the Everglades, and it fills up the capacity in the Everglades for us to send any lake water from Lake Okeechobee south. So now they get this management between the Corps of Engineers and the Water Management District, and they go to their schedule and they say, oh, we're at this high. this time of year, we really need to get the lake down by June 1st for hurricane season, and we've got to get the lake down. And they look at sending east and west, how much they're going to do that, and then how much they're going to send south to the maximum practicable. And when they consult the district, they go, oh, sorry, we can't send any south. We're already full. We have no capacity to send it south, where it should go rather than east and west. So we're fighting for a new schedule for the lake that would actually have 0 discharges to the St. Lucie and only minimal discharges to the Caloosahatchee.
Except for what, during an El Nino
Except,
kind of a
except
situation,
during
or-
a very high level, all of a sudden if the lake got way above 17
or a
feet,
bunch of storms. or
yeah,
something.
then they would have to discharge for the safety of everybody. And we understand that. But during the management band of this whole level, 0 to St. Lucie and only minimal to the Caloosahatchee. And the rest of it, you need to be sending south to the Everglades. Well, even if we had LOSM in today, the Corps would be having to make that decision, how much can we send south and how much needs to go south, and rather than east and west. But they've come to realize we need this new schedule because the estuaries need to be protected. And that's really critical for us, because right now we're getting inundated by these 42 days of releases.
brutal.
And it's brutal. And it's not just the freshwater killing, it's all the nutrients that come with it. We're getting about 5 metric tons of phosphorus and about 59 metric tons of nitrogen, which are very harmful to our estuary. They could cause algae blooms and cause all kinds of problems. Plus the total suspended solids, what we call that dirty water, turbid water. It's all the suspended silt and sediment.
Yep.
We're getting about 924 metric tons of that silt and sediment into the estuary. And what happens to that? It covers over the oyster reefs. It covers over, shades out the seagrasses and even the nearshore reefs. It covers over the coral reefs. And what it does is settle out in the deeper parts of the estuary to where you have this very thick muck. It's like a ooze, like a black mayonnaise is consistency. We've gone down and taken samples of this stuff, and it's terrible. And in fact, part of the Everglades restoration plan is to dredge about 7.9 million tons of that stuff out of here. So we know it's here, and it's accumulating more, and it's very detrimental to the habitats we mentioned: oysters, seagrasses, even other, the ecology of the whole estuary. And now in particular is a very critical time. Now we're getting into spawning season. In the spring, everything spawns. The oysters, seagrass are growing. It's a growing season. And then all the fish and invertebrates that spawn in the estuary during this time, they want that perfect balance of salt and fresh water between the ocean and the tributaries. So they want this kind of balance in order to create their spawn. Well, if they're spawning and then all of a sudden you have these big freshwater discharges, it can blow out a whole generations of animals. And it's incredible how we don't even, they're saying, oh yeah, we know, that's why we want to do it now. But now they're saying, well, we need to continue these releases beyond this last period of time at the end of March. They're going to continue them from April, May, and June into June 1st. And
that's you saying that is going to make a lot of people lose their minds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is the likelihood that it continues at this rate? Do you have any sense talking?
Well, they're
Yeah.
putting out now information to all the stakeholders around saying, well, what if we do this, or what if we do at this level, or this amount of discharge, or we reduce it here but not over there, or we put more here and not more here. It's going to be bad no matter how they describe it or how they do it, because they need to get this lake level down. And our response is, look, you can't go above these damaging levels of discharge. You cannot. We need to be in that optimum level and allow these estuaries to recover. Mm-hmm. And then you need to send this water south. You need to get that south. If you need to get the lake down, that's where it should go. It should send south. And yes, it may overwhelm what's there in the Everglades, but you need to keep it going south all the way through under Tamiami Trail and all the way through the Everglades Park to Florida Bay. And that's the way that water should be going. We're just going to see a major devastation, as we have in the past, unfortunately, because of this mismanagement of the lake. And the agencies really need to get together on this, not wait for another schedule. They can do it now. We don't have to wait for big regional projects.
It seems like it was
to
a
do it.
mess. Like there
You
was,
get now.
we were, and when I talked to Corey Bell, Major Bell, he said, right, you're doing lures with the spirit of Losum. But when push came to shove,
Yeah.
it was schizophrenic lures. We were right back in lures, full speed again. So,
Yeah.
you know, it seems like the thing to fight for is Losum right now.
Yeah. Well, it is.
That's the war.
Yeah, and people need to know Losum will not keep the lake higher. The lake schedule looks higher, about a half a foot higher than this current schedule we're in, but that doesn't mean the Corps has to keep the lake higher. Yes, we rebuilt the Herbert Hoover Dike. Yes, we reinforced it so that there in an emergency you could have more sustaining the lake. But we don't want the lake water in there either. We don't want high water in the lake. It's drowning the lake.
Right.
We've been drowning the lake since Hurricane Ian in 22. We dropped so much rain and still filled up the lake, and it's above its kind of ecological envelope, if you will.
Right.
It's keeping it too high and drowning out the submerged aquatic vegetation in the lake. We've lost like 40, 50,000 acres of vegetation in the lake. And as you and I talked earlier, that vegetation helps to clean the lake, helps to keep the lake healthy.
Right.
And a healthy lake actually will go down in periods of the year and then go up again. So we've all been fighting to keep the lake lower. You know,
But that's what you hear. That's the major pushback as well.
Yeah.
If we're going to keep the lake higher, if we're going to protect the estuaries, it's going to be at the
expense of the
detriment.
lake.
Yeah, right. So
That's-
where does it go then?
We can't, yes, we got to be sending it south. We have to, and manage it better. We knew this back in the fall. Back in the fall, in October, the lake jumped up from 15 to 16 feet.
Right.
And when it went over to 16 feet, they had the periodic call. The Corps looking at it. The Climate Prediction Center was showing El Nino. We're going to get a above normal wet season all through the dry season. And it's jumped up all this high. We said, you need to start now getting this lake level south. You need to start dropping this lake level now because you can't wait. Well, they waited and they said we're going to see what the dry season trend is going to do. And sure enough, we got rains in January, heavy El Nino rains, and the lake level kept going up, and it almost got to 16 and a half feet, and everybody go, well, I guess we got to start getting the lake down.
Yeah.
Well, yes, we told you this back in the fall. You knew this from all the predictions of El Nino. So now it's got too high, and now they have to get it down lower, and preparation for a tropical storm season in June 1st. And we're going into a La Nina, which will actually be worse for tropical storms. We'll get more tropical storm conditions because of La Nina.
But a drier winter, kind of a thing.
And it won't shear off like El Nino during the summer would shear off the tops of those tropical storms coming across the Atlantic. But with La Nina, you won't. So we may get heavy tropical storms on top of our wet season.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll bring even more water into the lake and into our region. Our problem is water, and usually it's mostly too much in the wrong places at the wrong time. And they have to get this timing right, the quality right, the distribution of this water right, and they can do it. What frustrates me is that they as water managers, the Corps and the district, can do this. They just have made other choices during this time period, not to put it here, but to put it over there, or wait to see, let's see what's going to do here. Come on, you can do a better job at this for the health of the lake.
So ideally, going into an El Nino, you're slicing water off the lake earlier.
You're cautious. Yeah, you slice it off because during that dry season, like had happened now, we're going to get heavier, above normal rainfall. And we did in January, February, and it filled up everything, including the lake. And the lake just got higher, and we get in trouble when it gets that high, not only for drowning the lake and all the SAV there, but it's also, it's critical for the dike. You can't let it be that high for that long a period of time. It's going to be critical. So it's this duration of how long are we going to have to endure these discharges. And everybody asks, well, once they stop, how long is it going to take to recover? Well, it takes a long time. So
Right.
the longer you damage something, the longer you take to recover. You know that. I mean, it's a health issue, right? It's
Right.
like, how long can you, be sick and damaged and the longer you're sick and damaged, the more longer time it's going to take for you to recover.
Mhm.
And essentially the same thing here with the estuaries. It's going to take a longer time to recover.
And where they were doing those previously, those smaller, what was it, 300,
The
400
pulse releases.
500.
Yeah.
CFS, it didn't do the damage to the oysters.
Yeah, like last year,
Right.
in January last year. In fact, January through April, they were actually doing smaller releases out of the lake. And that was,
And you saw salinity wise.
we saw salinities drop, but not to a critical point to where the oysters, seagrass, and other things were under a problem.
Right.
And they stopped in April, so they were not going to continue on until then. But, you're still high with a high lake level. And it's during that time that we knew, actually, last April, that the lake was still above its ecological envelope, and they should still try to get it down by
It
sending
seems
water
crazy
south.
high. I got to pull it up, the actual levels historically, but it seems really high for this time of year. Right?
It is, yeah, it is high this time of year. They shouldn't be up at this height, and sometimes we know too they keep it artificially high for water supply. So at this time of
For
year, yeah,
Jeez.
in November through May, our dry season,
Well, that
is,
answers the
is
question.
when
why.
they demand water out of the lake, and they take about a foot of water off of the lake for irrigating the Everglades agricultural area. So right now, you'll look at the charts, and there is openings of the three gates, the 354, 351, and 352. Those three gates out that go south to Miami, North New River, and Hillsborough Canal, those are open a bit now because they're demanding fresh water for irrigation water for the EAA. But it's not going through the STAs and into the water conservation areas. It's just staying in the EAA because now's their time to irrigate. They set their crops in March, and they set their crops this time of year. But in May, they're done. So they'll say, okay, we're done. We don't need to continue to draw water from the lake. But during that wet season and during even dry season, as we saw, if we get rains, they don't want to keep it perfectly drained. So they turn on those pumps, they pump it through the STAs, they pump it down south, and they artificially keep that drained so that they get the perfect crop condition. That's the frustration we have. They're not protecting that for flood control, they're protecting it for the crop yield. And that's my problem. Sugar is blocking this water from going south.
Do you see that getting remedied under LOSUM?
It's going to have to, because if you look at the LOSUM schedule, I see one right behind you there, there's a big arrow in the middle that says flow water south to the Everglades. And that big arrow is their management ban for what they're going to do, with zero going to the St. Lucie and only up to 2,000 to the Caloosahatchee. So that big arrow going south to flow south is what they're going to have to do. And, they're going to have to find a way to put this water south through the Everglades agriculture areas using our STAs, because it has to be treated before it goes to the Everglades. And then having more that opportunity versus keeping their crops just ideal drain conditions.
I mean, you pretty much answered it all.
Well,
Right there, man.
well, we're still, yeah, it is frustrating. And for those of us here, you mentioned earlier about, wow, this is damaging to it, not only the ecology and the environment, but to our livelihoods around here. You and I, and we live here in this area. And not only aesthetically, oh man, I can't let my kids go swimming in the river because there's, bad water or toxic water, algae blooms and
that
stuff.
apoptosis, it
Yeah.
goes in the air, man.
Yeah, and then
I will see in my
aerosolized.
practice that there's
Yeah.
more people having sinus problems, fatigue,
Sure.
lethargic, nasty migraines,
Yeah.
headaches. They're not well.
Yeah.
Itchy eyes,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
And so we're going into that season. So we're seeing algae blooms show up in the lake like they have before during this time when the water temperatures get warm, when there's lots of sunlight and even rain and nutrients coming in. then those blooms begin to happen. And they've already sampled some
Right,
microcystin blooms
right.
in the lake, mostly over on the southwest side,
Okay.
and then even some up in the north recently. Their toxicity levels aren't that high, but it's just the start of the season, right? It's just the start of this warmer water temperatures, sunlight, all the conditions right for
But under
algae.
LORs, who cares, right?
Yeah, so they're
Under
going to go
LORs,
ahead
there's
and
no
they're
harmful algae blooms don't exist.
Right. Now, there's been Representative Mass and others have been putting forward, legislation to say if there are harmful algae blooms, you shouldn't be discharging. And the Corps has become more aware of that in recent time.
Right.
So they're very sensitive to that idea, and we need to make them more sensitive to that, because you and I know what happens when this estuary gets all that blue-green algae. Not only is it nasty and full of nutrients and turbidity and everything for the habitats, it's also health-wise, it's a real problem. And socioeconomic-wise, it is a problem. I mean, people lose their business. I mean, think all the marine industries we have around here, the boaters, the fishermen, all the support services and systems, they all lose business and go out of business. And even real estate, people don't move
Right.
here because when I grew up
You're right.
around here, waterfront property was like ideal. It was like the premier property. If you lived on the waterfront, wow, you must be really valuable. It's affordable property, right? So there we're talking about how they're affected by this polluted water as well. And we have to stop the pollution, basically, in all of these systems, but particularly here in this estuary. And I want people to imagine what it would be like if it were stopped. And if we had ideal conditions, leave the estuary alone, let it come back, let those habitats come back, let the fish come back, all the different things that we value in these estuary. Those waterfront property values would go up. All the values of our businesses would thrive and be much, much better. We'd be in high demand. People would want to come here, not move away from here because it's polluted. They would want to come here because it's clean, good water to be around. And that's the way I grew up, and that's the way I want it to be for
You don't want to get off the bright line and go watch the coffee go by?
Yeah. I mean, that's, and unfortunately, some people that get off and look at that, they go, well, I don't see anything that's too bad. It's not bad during the dry times or during times we're not having discharges and the water looks pretty good.
Right.
But we say, yeah, but it can happen in just like that, and which it did this year. They could start discharging and we can get into this problem again.
And you're talking about the stormwater drainage for the entire state effectively, right? So
Yeah.
recently the city has had the PFOA case with 3M. We're just starting to come into an era where we're even detecting a lot of these chemicals that you can't see, that last forever, that have been being made for the last 50 years by all of these different companies.
Oh, yeah.
God knows, beyond phosphates and nitrogen
Right.
and potassium and whatever else is in ag chemicals and glyphosate, there's so much stuff that can be in water that we don't even have the capacity to detect yet.
Yeah.
Even
Even the microplastics. I mean, all the plastics, the actual
drugs,
all kinds of drugs and
I don't
everything.
even know, man.
I mean, it's all that pollution that we
Right.
need to stop. And, we've made some effort to say, well, septic tanks are an issue. Well, yeah, if they're close to water bodies and they're not in well-drained soils and you've got this problem, you're going to have, and high concentrations of them in certain areas, those runoffs can really cause an issue. But it's, in the scheme of things, it's a very minor part, less than 10 or 12% of our nitrogen inflow, for instance. It could be related to the 46,000 septic tanks we have in this area. That's minuscule compared to the other runoff from agricultural runoff and others that come into our site, which we've identified as within our watershed.
Even
and we've
the
made these
spraying
canals
that they do
to
on the
come-
lake. They're spraying the
right.
lake, right? They do.
Right.
The little boats go by and they're spraying.
Oh yeah, they
whatever
spray
they're
all this,
I don't even
like
know.
you said, glyphosate or other kind of herbicides, pesticides. They use copper sulfates a lot in citrus, for instance, to control the weeds. Well, all that runoff from all the citrus up in the canal C23, 24 all run off into our sediments. And the district found early on in the 80s and 90s, they were sampling, they found high concentrations of copper in there. And that's just going to lead to further, it's a toxic to us as humans. It's toxic. And when these pollutants get to that toxic level, then people start paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the blue-green algae was like a big issue, because, it's toxic. Well, all these other pollutants that you're mentioning and that we're just starting to detect in the water have toxicity levels that are harmful, not just to humans, but to animals and everything else that's around the water.
And that are forever chemicals that are they accumulate.
Yes,
Yeah,
bioaccumulation in the living tissues of animals, including ourselves. We all probably ingest lots of plastic every day and we don't even know it. And that polyvinyl chlorides are all, embedded now into our systems, and it's really sad to know. So the sooner we can stop the pollution, the better. Mm-hmm. And our whole goal is get it at the source of the problem. Let's go upstream, up into the Kissimmee Valley, and say, hey, if you guys are having this loading from your runoff, let's work with you guys and put some, treatment and controls right there so that we can
do it
treat
with
that
development.
before you go. Exactly.
With development, we force you to keep your stormwater on site. So it baffles me
Right.
how that mindset isn't being projected onto stormwater drainage in the state at large.
Yeah. We should. You're exactly right. If we're requiring it for this particular land use, why not all the land uses? Whether you're agriculture, or urban, or development, whatever, you should be required to retain and detain that water to get rid of those pollutants so that your runoff is not going to affect downstream. Because downstream, it becomes a river, it becomes a lake, it becomes our estuary. And those downstream conditions are what we're trying to protect.
And it's one thing when it's 100 years ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's 100. There's nobody here.
Yeah.
There's enough water and people and aquifer to sort of mitigate the damage of using DDT or whatever these things that we were using. But at some point, there's so many people here. You have to be extra careful about what you allow to go into the environment, or it can get really ugly really fast.
You make a great point. I mean, it's the people that, we have to be cautious to things, how much we overpopulate an area, because you can have so much density in an area.
Which nobody seems to want to slow that down.
I know that it just overwhelms your waste support system. You can't handle it fast enough to be able to control it, and therefore it becomes a pollution. It becomes pollution in your environment. So the densities are really important. You've got to also control what we do and how we consume products. I mean, if we can change our way to say we're not going to tolerate pollution products, and we're not going to tolerate that anymore. We want to go to environmentally friendly, biodegradable systems. We want to be able to handle our waste stream better.
Can I give you one that's crazy that nobody thought about that I brought up recently is, in light of PFOA and PFOS, the straws, okay? So we were all like, no plastic straws, right? No plastic straws, save the water. Well, the reason that a plant-based, straw is able to keep water from soaking through it instantly is because it's coated in PFOA.
Oh, jeez, great. So they call it a paper straw, but it's coated in plastic. Pushing
out plastic straws, we've actually increased PFOA, PFOS, which is a forever chemical. It's like this kind of a thing.
We've done that in other packaging, like cartons. Sometimes the cartons, you think, oh well,
pizza
it's
boxes,
plastic, right?
They have PFOS,
but they're coated with this material to help keep them protected or preserved. So somehow we've got to get local, buy local, support local in what we do, and get rid of packaging, get rid of all that kind of stuff. And it's going to take a long time to get through all that, because we're so used to the convenience. We're so used to the immediacy of, I want it now, and I want it in this nice convenient package. Well, I'm sorry, we've got to change that, because we're polluting our planet. When I was born back in the 50s, it was like 2.2 billion people on this planet. Now there's 8 billion.
And most of them live in Florida.
Yeah. There was like 2 million in Florida. Now there's 22 million or 23 million. And it's growing 1,000 a day. And it's those 1,000 a day that are coming to our area that we need to educate about this issue. We need to say, hey, you're moving to Florida. You're moving to Martin County. You're moving to this city of Stewart area. You need to understand our way here, our culture here. And you're moving to this beautiful water area that's surrounded by water, and it has certain qualities that we value very highly. And so you're going to have to participate in protection of this. And if you don't want to agree to that, then go somewhere else.
See,
All
I'm,
right?
I'm more
sorry. You need to.
I'm more pessimistic than you.
Yeah.
My mindset is like
Yeah.
humans are humans,
Humans are humans.
and so your best bet is to stop creating more units for
Well,
them to dwell
that's
in
true.
here.
That's true.
You know, just stick to your land
know.
use and zoning, and
I
whatever
know.
this place can support in terms of population density, that's what it can support. You got to look somewhere else. I'm sorry.
And that's exactly. I mean, you're right on, because there is a limit
There's
as
a
to how
limit.
much it can support. And we talked about a minute ago. It's like, what is that limit? Well, let's figure it out. Okay, guys, for this land area, this area, we can support so many units per acre. Let's develop to that and be done with it. You know,
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, they just get replaced. You know, as people die or move on, you know, then they can
Yeah.
be resold,
Sure.
and it just gets more and more valuable. Right?
Exactly.
But don't overpopulate it, because then what is it? Why are you doing that? It's all about greed. It's all about money. It's all about people wanting to make a buck. And it was like years back, I think, about when we were growing up here, we were thinking, this is going to be this is going to be like the St. Petersburg of the East Coast, because all the condos that were going up, there were condos and condos and condos, and we thought, oh great, this is going to be the haven for all these people who are coming to these condos. Well, what started to happen too was bigger developments out west of us had, like Martin Downs and other places had, you know, ideas. Well, we want a big development,
Planned
but we
community.
want a community. So a planned unit development idea, and the idea of, well, we want open space. We want, you know, things, because we think people are attracted to that, or would like to live in a place like that. And so their brochures had blue herons on them, and,
Right.
and nice waterways and things like that. And it was like, that was their attraction. And sure enough, it worked, because you're, again, the lower densities, the more land, the people, the amenities, the natural amenities people wanted to move here for.
Enjoy our good nature.
Enjoy our good nature.
Right.
We're being promoted, not come and just because we got a place for you.
Yes.
You know,
We have a 600 square
we'll
foot
stick a
unit
house. Yeah,
with
we'll
your
stick
name
a
on
house
it.
over here, house over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Tons of houses here, and then try to figure out how we can support that.
It's never, you know, you do have environmental consultants that are a part of the process that are paid for by the applicant or whatever, but
Yeah.
there's not a larger macro environmental picture of Florida.
Yeah.
How many humans can be sustained?
Yeah, we wish there were. Back in the 80s, when we did our comprehensive plans for the county, and all the counties were doing comprehensive plans, are like, okay, let's try to figure that out. And what do those future land uses need to be? And what do those preserve areas, where do they need to be? And how much preserve area do we need to maintain the ecology of our system? Well, they said, we can't figure that out now. All we got to do is figure out land uses. But those are vulnerable to change. And the changes in those comprehensive plans, commission by commission, all around our state, used to have to go through a state agency, which then previous administrations in the state got rid of and said, no, we don't want those reviews. They used to go through regional planning councils too, to be regionally acceptable on a regional basis. That doesn't happen anymore. It's more like just, hey, if you want to change your comprehensive plan and do something different and increase, that's exactly what happened south of us in Miami-Dade. And I've talked to people who grew up down there and lived down there, and it was much like it was up here. There was a lot of big open space, different kind of thing. Well, each commission decide, well, we want to develop more and develop more and develop more, and move it further west and keep, expanding those urban boundaries. Next thing you know, it's suburbia and it's spread out and it's just solid density everywhere.
Yeah, they invented the zero lot line thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I can't live like that with zero lot lines, but people do, I guess, and they're choosing to move. But I guess if you build it, they will come, kind of
That's
thing.
the thing.
And that we got to be careful, because we can build it and they will come, but then you can't support it. It's not sustainable.
And usually it's apologists for either development or, you'll hear the affordable housing crew that'll say we need more supply. But my contention would be there are some markets where the normal rules of supply and demand don't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
You're in
Yeah.
you're in an alternate universe here in Florida, and if you build it, they're going to come
Yeah.
because Martin County is going to be,
Yeah.
better, cheaper,
Yeah.
and more green spaced than where they're from.
Right.
So,
So but it gets back to that sustainability, and I wish we would take the time to plan it right and plan the community so that they're planned right and we don't overdevelop. We don't
you need real
full
leaders
density.
in seats, man. You need
Yep.
real people
Yep.
that are gonna
step up and
really,
champion.
really
some
look
effort.
into it,
Yep.
hold the line,
Yeah.
do what's reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about providing, I moved here. I mean,
Yep.
people move here. We move here and enjoy this. You can't just kind of build a fence and deny everybody from coming. But at the same time, you want them to experience a
But
good
you also don't need to
experience.
change every land use and
Yes.
zoning to make it more.
Right.
It's not
Right.
even a property rights thing.
Right.
It's just
Right. It's just
what's a maximum units we can
yes.
put here?
What is the sustainable maximum?
It's ag
units?
land. How about
Yeah.
apartments?
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
It's not anywhere near the urban service boundary.
We'll just
that pesky
expand
little
it.
thing.
Yeah, that pesky little thing.
can
we'll
we
just
do
kind of
here?
make
Yeah.
an exception to that rule.
Right.
Yeah. So they do, and
It's nowhere
unfortunately-
close to the old days where we had to make sure that every possible cross T dot I was correct. This wasn't wetland.
Yeah.
This was complete.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
appropriate to build on. This
Right.
portion of that.
Yeah.
You can't have the density for over there. It's got to be
Right.
right there. That's it. That's what you can build.
So it's much like where we were 100 years ago with this,
Yeah.
right? We were wanting to drain the swamp, get rid of this valueless land. We wanted to get rid of it. We wanted to do other things, make it developable. And so we built canals, we built drainage systems, and just we didn't care where we dumped it. We didn't care. We didn't think about that, how impacts that would happen. But then all of a sudden now we go, oh my gosh, we got a different set of mind now, but we're stuck with this system. Well, if you
Right.
do the same with development, you're going to be stuck with that system. You're going to say, well, gee, we overdeveloped. That's too bad. I guess we're just stuck with that. Well, you can start now thinking about
Right.
ahead.
It's unacceptable for me because I don't know where else you go.
Yeah.
If there was somewhere else to go, maybe, but
Yeah.
this is kind of the Alamo for me.
Well, this is our home,
Yeah.
man. We live here. We want to protect it, and I want it to be better for my kids and their kids. I mean, I grew up here with it, not thinking about toxicology or bacteria problems or any kind of. There was fish everywhere. We ate everything coming out of that river. It wasn't a problem. I mean, it was just But when I came back, it was like, oh my gosh, this is like totally bad. And how could I? Now I've got to tell my kids and their kids, don't stay out of the water. You can't go
Jeez.
near that stuff.
Right.
I used to, it may never be what it was like before, but I
don't
got
know.
to
Maybe
try.
if you scoop all the muck out
Yeah.
and the reservoirs built
and
and
you
completed.
stop, yeah, and
you
you,
know,
stop these discharges.
Worst case scenario, you do some little pulses.
Right. Right, and you stop all the other input.
How many feet of
pollution.
muck are up in the?
Well, there's probably out in
Or-
here in the middle estuary. There's about 6 or 8 feet
Right.
thick of
Right.
muck, and there's about 7.9 million cubic yards of stuff that they got.
Legacy
rid of.
muck with God knows what
Right.
in it.
Yep,
That gets stirred up, right?
it's like black
Each round.
mayonnaise, right? And it doesn't have to have discharges, but if the wind, strong winds like today, or the winds and tides can stir that back up, it's flocculent. It's suspended in the water and flows out. It's bad stuff. So we got to dig that out. Used to be sandy bottom, it used to be good bottom. And if you can get rid of that and ameliorate it out in the west of town and into the soils out there, and then, it's less than 10% organic, most of it. So it's not really this great organic stuff you
What
could
is it?
repurpose. It's mostly silts and clays. So it's a soil, very fine soils, but if you can amend it into existing soils properly, it's not going to hurt anything, but does it have other stuff in it? And you have to test for that. We
I
dredged.
remember being in high school
Yeah.
up by the rope swing and stuff, and it felt like
Oh yeah,
Jello.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
A really
kind of
thin.
sick, right? And it's almost slick in some areas,
Yeah.
like the consistency of black mayonnaise, and it's really nasty.
Mayonnaise is
stuff.
actually good.
Yeah, black mayonnaise. And I would hold up bags of it at meetings, and I still do. And I'm not going to stop because that's the stuff we are accumulating here at what I say, 924 metric tons.
Do you ever
During
test
this
what's in
42.
that stuff?
We don't,
Like
but
mass spectrometry or whatever, put it under
there-
and see what's in
the
there?
district has done some, but through the university system, they've done some. And that's where we get this kind of, the toxicity, especially when they dredge a project, like they did Manatee Pocket. They dredged some out of there. They had to do the testing, and they held it over there by US 1. They made a big berm around it and held it in there. Once it kind of, drained out and got dried out, it wasn't as harmful as they thought it might be, but they still had to, dispose of it in a way that wouldn't harm anything, right? But it's, like you said a while back, it's more and more as we get on, we put more and more stuff in it, right? There's more and more stuff we didn't even think about before. Right. So we have to be very diligent about when we do remove that stuff to really test it and make sure it's not going to be just putting this pollution somewhere else. We gotta cut it down and just stop it. But I do want to make sure people remember that it can be different, and if it can be really good, and keep that vision in mind, because that's what we're working for. That's what we're striving for. If we leave this estuary alone, let it be an estuary, let the river be a river, let the lake be a lake, it will come back eventually. But we have to stop polluting it. We have to let it alone. We have to respect it and treat it right, and just keep the pollution out of there. So,
have you ever heard that quote, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they'll never sit"? You ever heard that before?
No, that's a good one.
That's how I think of you and the Rivers Coalition crew. For my kids, you guys are. Hopefully, it gets done in their lifetime.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, the reservoir is an example. All these big regional projects,
right,
going to take years and lots of money, and it's going to go well beyond my time. I mean, the integrated delivery schedule alone is just like, okay, well, where am I going to be 2035? It's like, okay.
Hopefully enjoying
clean water. Hopefully enjoying clean water. Well, that's the hope. But it's like you said in that little statement, I just hope it's good for the next generation, the next people who come here, and hopefully they'll understand, hey, they had to fight to stop this pollution, and now it's just nice. I
hope it's on a plaque somewhere that what the St. Lucie had to endure for 100 years, kind of a thing,
Exactly.
Like, oh, that's crazy. It looks nice. What's wrong? There was an issue?
There was an issue? I didn't know that. Right.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah, there needs to be the history. And some of that, maybe we can embody some of this history of these awful times into the museum or something in Stewart.
Exactly.
Somewhere in the museum in Stewart. Because as I went to the county commission not too long ago in Martin County, I said in 1930, it was December 15th, 1930, that the Martin County Commission passed this resolution, and it's in public records, and I gave them a copy, and it said, we resolved to the Internal Improvement Trust Fund, which is in Florida, to say, stop these discharges to the St. Lucie because you're killing our fish. You're bringing in water hyacinths into here. All the shellfish are dying, and it's really muddy, bad water. Stop those discharges back then. That was December 15th, 1930. So, they needed to keep saying that over and over, year after year, and keep pushing. If we had a strong enough group back then to push all the way.
But there wasn't enough people here, right?
No,
I mean, nobody cared.
Yeah, they didn't care.
That's
right.
It's just some hillbillies over St. Lucie.
Right, exactly. And so now as we've grown and we've grown more understanding the system and figuring this out, we should take that responsibility. The responsibility, now that you know the problem, you need to be responsible for the solution. You need to help get this solved and get this done right. And I honestly think the Corps and the district want to do that. I
get that sense too.
They're not like they were back when they built this system.
Their hands are tied with Congress, right. What the parameters are for what's important.
Right.
What the totem pole is.
And how much they can afford to do. I mean, they can, they have to support whatever they do engineering wise, but it's the re-engineering of the system. It's the reconfiguring of how we deal with flood control in our area. and allow flooding of the environments like the Everglades and allow rehydration of the Allapattah and the flatwoods out here. You know, back in that day, we were like two components, the C44 and the C2324 are the two out of the 68 components. So the Indian River Lagoon South project was formed to have those two components. But also, as we were formulating that by 2007, we also got approved 90,000 acres of natural storage in the system, the Allapattah, Cypress Creek, and Palmar. And it was designed that way so that we could, what does that mean, natural storage? Well, it means you're taking these 90,000 acres and damming up the ditches that drained them. You're taking out the exotics. You're allowing those flatwoods to rehydrate. So yeah, they're going to look wet when you get a heavy rainfall, and it takes a couple of days to percolate down and evaporate off. But that's okay. That's the way they normally would function.
And where do you think your water's going to come from? Your
yeah,
aquifer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So restoring those flows back into the aquifer, back into the cloud, the evaporation. That's what we want. The nature can do a lot better job at managing this water if we let it, if we allow that to happen. But I would argue that time engineers wanted, well, we got to get 200,000 acre feet of storage, and we can only do that through these reservoirs and stuff like that. I said, well, yeah, this isn't that much storage comparatively, even if it's 90,000 acres, but it's better storage. It's better storage and treatment of that water because you're letting it naturally rehydrate the land. You're not draining it off just for these purposes.
I hate to sound negative about the EAA reservoir because I know it's like our hope, but it is a concern I have. Is like it's a 30-foot wall high storage tank.
Big,
like
yeah.
I don't know, man. I guess I don't put enough faith in human engineering. Maybe I'm just being negative, but generally natural systems. I'm 40.
Yep.
In my 40 years that I'm just observing nature and reality. It seems like natural systems.
Yeah.
They may not do what you want them to do, but they function the way they're supposed to.
Yeah. Well, before during the re-study in the late 90s, there was the science subgroup and the recon study. Both suggested what we call a flowway. And that was from the lake south to the Everglades, right through the EAA. And it was basically between Miami and North River Canal. And there were two groups that proposed this third outlet to the lake that would be more of a natural flowway, shallow flowway, uptake the nutrients, so forth. By the time it got there, it's still doable. It's still functional.
Where?
Between Miami and North New River canals. There are two canals that go south from the lake.
Okay.
And we already own 76,000 acres out of the 130,000.
What's the issue, though?
There's two owners of property, about 30 to about 50,000 acres north of that, between there and the lake.
Got it.
U.S. Sugar and the Florida Crystals. We can convince them to
There's
sell us a little bit of land.
Thing.
We can get that flowway. And during that time when U.S. Sugar wanted to divest of everything they had back in there, we were ready to buy it in 2008 and 9. It was like looking pretty good. Wow, we could trade it off and maybe
the crash helped, or what was it?
Well, then the recession or whatever dropped in 2010. We were only able to purchase, instead of 180,000 acres where we could trade it off to get that, we were only able to get about 27,000 acres.
Hence the 30
with the option to buy over the next 10 years. Well, that option never got exercised, and U.S. Sugar decided, well, the economy's looking good after 2012, 11, 12. They said, we don't want to sell it anymore. So they railroaded everything and said, we don't want to sell. Well, sugar prices are good, and you know that. I mean, they're unfortunately being supported in the Farm Bill, and every 5 years that comes up to the U.S. Farm Bill, provides for price supports and import quotas for domestic sugar, which means that they drop below, if the price of sugar, domestic sugar, dropped below 18 cents a pound, they could forfeit their federal loans. And you and I have to buy the surplus sugar and try to sell it. The world market price for sugar is about 8 or 9 cents a pound. So a lot of manufacturers who use sugar have gone offshore to Jamaica or other places to make their candy and then import it back. They can't afford the domestic sugar. So domestic sugar, though, is also protected by import quotas. So these import quotas, like from NAFTA, CAFTA, all these import things. We could import a lot more sugar. In fact, grows a lot better in other places than here, and but they protect that in the
I always figured that
Farm
these
Bill.
subsidies were just money laundering for political campaigns. It gave a surplus for.
Well, every political campaign that comes up, you've got domestic sugar is supporting, both sides of the aisle, so to say, so that no matter who gets in, they've got you kind of as far as they're lobbying heavy. They lobby heavy to keep the status quo. We want the water right. We want our irrigation or our drainage right, and we want to keep those price supports and import quotas in the Farm Bill. We were close to it in year 2000 when Senator Lugar who was in charge of the Agriculture Committee in the Senate, called me up and Shannon Estenos, and we went up to testify how much pollution was coming out of there. But he wanted to get it out of the Farm Bill as well, get these two things there. But they're also, besides the sugarcane lobbyists, we're also sugar beet farmers.
Okay.
The sugar beets are in the Midwest and middle areas. Try to say, well, you got to separate those out. Those are different farm situations, smaller farmers that maybe need some help, support. But big sugarcane conglomerates, no, they don't. We produce in south of the lake, just for scale, they produce about 2.1 million tons of sugar. Whereas in Cuba, they used to produce 11.8 tons of Cuba. And so that amount of, but now they don't, because that was in pre-Castro days. And of course, then all of those folks moved up here. They began growing sugar. But they're growing also in Dominican Republic and other places. But it grows better in the Caribbean down there, and actually in other places in South and Central America. And less harmful to the environment than in this river of grass. We basically took the river, dammed the river, let them grow the crop right in the riverbed, and said, we're going to put the water over to your property and to this property. And I just don't think that's right. I think they ought to restore the river of grass and revive the river grass. And
can you, with the consent decree that was signed for the water quality to go into the Everglades? Is it, with how much work you have to go through now to get water to the proper, I don't know the number, ppms of whatever.
About 10 parts per million in phosphorus and 13 flow weighted mean.
It seems like it's so much work to get it to that point before you can even.
No, it's possible.
Okay.
And they've already done really good with the STAs that we have, the stormwater treatment areas, and the marshes, man-made marshes already do that. They do a lot of great treatment, but they're treating basin runoff from there at about, it's 100 to 200 parts per billion. They're treating it down to 19. So it can be done. They can get to that point, and they have to by 2025, actually.
Or what?
Under the QBEL. Otherwise, EPA comes down heavy on them. But that consent decree.
It sounds like it's going to be like a real fierce.
Yeah, like, you can't meet it now, meet it later. Yeah.
Stop it.
But in 1988, when that lawsuit was filed against the state from the Everglades National Park, basically the federal government said, you're polluting too much. We had 300 or 400 parts per million coming from sugar basically down into the Everglades. They had to do something, so they sued the state. They actually the lawsuit should have been against the polluters. It should have been against the sugar or whatever ag was producing that high level of phosphorus, right? But instead it was against the state. So the state said, Lot and Child said, okay, I give up. What do I have to do? Well, you have to treat this water before it comes to the Everglades. You have to build these stormwater treatment areas. We said, yeah, but that shouldn't be our responsibility. It should be the polluter's responsibility. And they tried to put in a pollution, polluters pay amendment to our Constitution, which was successful in Article 2, Section 7B of our Florida Constitution. We got in an amendment in there in 1996 that said, if you're in the Everglades agricultural area and you're causing pollution, you're responsible for the cost of the abatement of that pollution. Sounds pretty clear, but it was left to interpretation by the legislature. So what the state legislature did says, well, we'll do an agricultural privilege tax to the sugar industry. And so what that did was $25 an acre was their agricultural privilege tax, which generates about $11 million a year. It costs us $22 million a year to maintain the stormwater treatment areas, and it cost us $2.8 billion to buy these stormwater treatment areas. And now we're paying double that to maintain them.
Yeah, you'd think the tax would be somewhat
Yeah.
tethered to
Yeah.
what it would cost to clean it.
Right. But it's not.
Jeez, man.
They don't pay for their cleanup, and they should be.
And the comical part is what kind of subsidies are coming through.
Right.
So I'm paying for that.
We're paying for it and paying for it and paying for it.
Jeez.
Right. And they, it's just a responsible landowner would say, okay, I got to belly up and build my own STA, my own reservoir, my own stormwater treatment area before it runs off into the works of the district, into the Everglades, into the Lake Okeechobee. And that's all we want to do is say upstream, downstream, you got to work with this. We got to work with those landowners. Look, we'll help you, but get it at the source of the problem. Don't wait till it gets downstream and have to big central cleaning system. It's just like, you can do it right there before you get it into the streams, right? Into the estuary, into the lake. You can do it before it gets into the water, up in the watershed. That's why they have watershed protection plans, and that's why it aggravates me, because we have watershed protection plans for Lake Okeechobee, the St. Lucie, Caloosahatchee. And they said, well, we'll implement it with basin management action plans, a 15-year plan, which started for us in 2013. And now they get into 2028, they'll say, well, we're not going to make those reduction goals, so we're going to kick the can another 5 years down the road, another 5 years. So like you said, a little slap on the hand. Well, we didn't quite meet those reductions to meet our total maximum daily load, so we're just going to kick the can down the road. So those hearings are coming up this next month, beginning April, and you better believe I'm engaged in that and saying, look, you're not meeting it through your BMAP process or the BMPs, the best management practices. FDACs, the
You're doing
Department of
God's
Agriculture.
work, man. Thank you so
They're
much.
they're trying to get this, and I'm all about best management practices. Get those ag uses to do the right thing and to store and treat, just like you said earlier, retain and detain that water on your own property and treat it before it runs off. We'd be much better off.
I mean, money is great, right? Everybody needs money to survive, right? We all want growth and improvement and good.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
At what cost?
If you can't restrain that
Right.
with the thought of what kind of environment are you
Yeah.
going to be living in, you can't just keep kicking that can.
No, you can't. It's like, we can't deny climate change. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of scientists and panels all over the world know climate change, and some are more threatened than others. Like if you live on an island in the Pacific, it's there. You can tell sea level rise. I'm sorry. Thermal expansion of the ocean levels is rising. It's undeniable.
That was a pretty crazy year the other year. It
And
was
in
last
South
year,
Florida.
the year before, where it
Yeah.
was so hot. The ocean was so hot.
It was so hot. It's been reaching higher
That was
and
kinda
higher
crazy.
temperatures every year. And
But that year was freakishly hot.
freakishly. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it last year? Last summer?
I think it was in 22 or 23.
Yeah.
But it's more and more.
Like it didn't follow a
Realization.
trajectory. It was
Right.
like normal. This year.
So we realize it there. But if you live in Montana or something, you're going, yeah, I don't care about. But if you live in Miami or South Florida, you can see flooding, not just king tides anymore. This is constant. You're seeing this, you're seeing the effects of sea level rise. And so climate change is real. Climate change, we have to build what we call resilience. Well, the best resilience is, like you said
Trees.
earlier, yeah, natural systems, right?
Roots.
To uptake the carbon
Right.
and try to get rid of all
It's
that.
not a baffle box.
Yeah. So let's get some natural solutions in place and help all the landowners to do that, whether you're in an urban area or a rural area. Come on, let's take responsibility and help work together to get the solutions in place and make them natural solutions, not engineered ones that we have to maintain. And I mean, think how much pumps. It's like aquifer storage and recovery pumps. I mean, that's constant electric use, and you have to pump water down a hole and hopefully recover it back. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, what we're doing to mitigate systems like that is build more systems. And,
Right.
Some people go, well, it's
Unnatural systems.
yeah, really crazy that we hired the Corps of Engineers in the district who built these systems to kind of retrofit them to, restore the natural system. But we have.
Hey, aren't you the guy
Yeah.
that
Aren't
just
you
lit
the
my
guy
house
that-
on fire?
Yeah.
Yes, but I can also
But
put it out.
I could also put it out. I have a fire department.
Maybe.
Right. Maybe.
Maybe.
Right.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, maybe we'll figure it out. But,
It's a curious thing, man.
I think what our common thing is we all want a better future. We
Yes.
all want this. Those of us who've been around know what it looks like. Those of us who haven't been around can visualize what it can be like.
It seems like a lot of the new people that are showing up are going, whoa, wait, what?
Yeah.
At that last Rivers Coalition meeting, there was
Yeah.
that one guy
Yeah,
that
there were some
he
New
worked
guys. Yeah.
on the boat bottoms. He's like,
Yes.
I can't even work.
Yeah.
What's
Exactly.
what's up with these discharges? Is this
Yeah.
a new thing?
What is this? What is
Welcome.
this? Just start how?
Welcome. Come on.
Welcome. Come on. Yeah.
This is
welcome
you guys don't put up with
Yeah.
this, do you? This isn't
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Come on over.
Welcome to the party, man.
Yeah. Well, and that's
But
it.
that fresh, that was so nice to hear.
It was good.
You almost have to imagine that this hasn't been going on for 100 years and that this water was crystal blue,
Yeah.
minus our own,
Yep. Yeah.
basins or whatever, but that it was
Yep.
clean,
Yep.
and then tomorrow they started doing this discharge, how upset you'd be. And that's how that guy
Yeah.
feels. And
Yeah.
he's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how you should
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
That,
That's how
that
you should
upset.
feel. You should be that upset.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're just sort of so used to
And we're
being
kinda like,
abused
yeah,
for 100
so
years.
exactly.
Like, well,
And you know
we
it.
should fight though.
In your practice, you're abused, and then next thing you know, well, I guess I got to just deal with the pain. No, you can get this corrected and correct this system, and now you're better because you've taken action to help correct your problem. You haven't just kind of lived with it or been apathetic to it.
True.
So we can't be apathetic, even though you think, well, it's not too bad. I guess we can live with it. No, it's bad, and you need to do something to help.
When, to your knowledge, I've heard that the plan is to dredge out the muck after the EAA reservoir is built and functioning. Is that your understanding?
This in the St. Lucie?
Right.
Yeah, they have. It's part of the Indian River Lagoon South plan. Like I said, 90,000 acres of natural storage, dredging out the muck, replacing habitat like oyster reefs and seagrass. That's all part of the plan. It's further down the schedule because right now they're working on trying to complete the C44 and get that operational. They've built it, now it's got to be operational, and that's the C23-24 project. But there's a
What's the timeline on on C44?
It's operation. It's
Did they
in an
do
operational testing phase right now.
Have they been doing those? I forget what they called it.
Yeah.
The seepage, the wall.
The seepage
thing with
wells and stuff,
seepage well.
and the south corner. Yeah, the southwest corner.
Have
They've had problems.
have they installed them?
I don't know if they've installed them. They might have let the contract on them, but that's a question for the Corps and
I know.
Major Bill
We need
and
to
some
buy 'em.
others. Yeah, let's see how they're progressing with that. Because once they get that operational, it could take water at 1,100 cubic feet per second.
Right.
It could take it out of the lake, put it in the reservoir,
Yep.
store it, and then allow it to go through the STAs are beautiful. They're great marshes and habitats. And, they got a lot of great birds out there and everything right now. So they're ready and for the system to be operational. Same with the C23-24 project up north they're building. And there's also dispersed water management projects that they're working on. They're like Hawkins Groves or Scott Farms and stuff. These are old landowners, old groves and stuff that can take water and store it on there and allow it to percolate down the aquifer and recharge.
How does that work?
Stuff.
What benefit is there? Do they get a credit or something?
They get credit and even paid for environmental services. Or you can do it through conservation easements. And a lot of times up in the upper Kissimmee Basin, we can do conservation easements. You can say, look, just keep your land the same, agriculture use, but if we need to store water over here, can you move your cattle over on that part of your 3,000 acres? Move them over there for a while we need to store water over here. Sure, we could do that. So, yeah, you can get a benefit for doing that, but at the same time, the environment gets a benefit because you're storing more water instead of just draining it off. And cattle farmers around here understand that too. I've talked with some locals that they used to just want to drain, get rid of the water. But then they realized, wow, we can get into a drought and then our cows don't have water. So we better allow these
Bone
lands
dry land isn't good
allow
for grass.
exactly.
Right?
So they
Grass-fed cows
allow
are
them
thinning
to
out.
rehydrate and allow them to keep that hydration in the land is actually better.
Mhm.
So they've plugged up a lot of ditches and they're retaining a lot more water than they used to. A lot near Alapata and those places. So a combination of all these things can really help benefit. But again, it's going back to natural kind of systems to help us get to where we want to be in this storage. Good.
Awesome. You're the man.
All
You're the
right.
man. So anything else?
So we're good?
Yeah, man. Anything else you feel the average human should be thinking about?
Well, I think,
Probably looking at discharges till June.
yep. We're still probably going to be into them even through the spawning season, unfortunately. So it may affect it. You need to be diligent about every kind of land use you have around the water, whether it's, just runoff from your own. Again, we're going into those cycles of urban fertilizer. If you're fertilizing your yard, don't do it during the rainy season, because it runs off into the nearby water body. And we don't need all this extra nitrogen and phosphorus. So those are things that we as local folks can do, physically or collectively. We can have a voice to say, we need to change this system or that system. We're also working at Florida Oceanographic and others to help restore habitats. So we're working to restore oyster reefs and seagrass beds. And we're pretty successful in using volunteers and help to weave together fiber mats of seagrass mats and put them in places and then monitor those growth
Do you
rates.
guys do the oysters?
And we do oysters.
Yeah.
We collect shell and we put the shell back out where there were oyster reefs. And we have a hatchery where we can inoculate them with the millions of eyed larvae.
Do you ever do that test where they put the little colony of them in a tank and it
stringers?
cleans the tank out?
Yeah.
That's so good.
We have that, I think, on our website where you can see it. Split tank. Like one's dirty water and they're both dirty water, and then the one side has the oysters, and they start cleaning the water. They start filtering the water, and it
Can we do one of those in front of the Corps?
clean. Yeah, we should. We should say this is why we're trying to
Yeah.
protect these habitats. Is
Even
for
with the
clean
discharge,
water.
like put that water in the
Yeah,
tank.
yeah.
15 minutes later, you might almost drink it, maybe.
And during these times, like particularly algae crisis, you get a lot of people very innovative coming up with solutions that, hey, we can clean it up for you. We can do this to clean it up. Well,
I'd rather just plug the
yeah,
hole.
we don't want to clean it up.
Right.
We don't want to have to be in the mode of cleaning it up all the time. We want to stop it from happening. And that's what the Blue-Green Algae Task Force that the governor put in place back in 2019, 2020.
What's the plan with that?
They made all these recommendations to the state legislature to clean it up before it comes into the system. And like out of the, 60 or whatever recommendations, there were like 2 or 3 that got recommended. I mean, they have, our goal every session was been implement the recommendations from the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, because they're a group of scientists that got together.
What were some of the recommendations?
Well, it was to stop those pollutions in the upstream, up in the watershed. Let's go up to the watershed. Let's find out where those
By enforcing the BMAPs up there or something?
and
Or what?
enforce the BMPs, best management practices. Let's do that up there. And then, they got away from focusing, well, yes, we have to notify people that these are coming. The blue-green algae is here, or it's there, or where is it? It's toxic or it's not toxic. We got to do that, but they didn't want to focus on cleanup. It's not like, well, they heard a lot about innovative, hey, we can scoop it up here and treat it with this or treat it with peroxide or this kind. Well, that's fine, but we want to look at the source of the problem. What's causing the blue-green algae in the first place? Back in 2000, before 2005, we didn't have any blue-green algae problems in the lake. There might have been a sporadic potential bloom here and there, but it was
Glyphosate, right?
It was almost like,
Have you seen that?
no, I haven't.
So the idea is, I got really into this in like 2016 when it was bad,
Wow.
But glyphosate caused rapid cell proliferation. So you had, your fertilizers, which will enlarge the cell. The cells will swell,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
The glyphosate somehow induced rapid cell reproduction. So the cocktail of having
To kill us.
larger cells
And then rapid reproduction.
more of them reproducing is how you end up with the bloom.
Wow.
And then when it hits the fresh water, it goes into apoptosis and cell death, and you know
Yeah.
it releases all that hell
Well,
into
it's
the air and stuff.
yeah.
But the glyphosate particularly as a chemical induced
sets it off.
the bloom.
Yeah, and if we know these
Cyanobacterial.
things, we need to stop the inducement
It's
of
not for lack of knowledge.
Yes.
It's always money.
right. It's always or will to do it.
Yeah, right. Political will.
Nobody
putting-
says, "Hey,
Nobody wants to
well,
put their head
yeah,
on the chopping block.
That's not a priority for us. You know, we're not important. This is more priority over here."
I'll tell you what I want to do. You know me. I would love for us to have an environmental attorney, just like in the same
Yep.
way that, and not to start suing everybody and go Wild West, and shooting guns. More
Right.
like,
Yep.
Sugar already sued the Corps over Lower's
Yeah.
08. They're
Yeah.
going to sue over Losum.
Yeah.
They're just getting ready.
They're
Why'd
just
they
doing
wait
it.
till
Right.
now?
Right. Right.
They're going to sue over
Yeah.
Losum, and they're going to have a federal judge
Right.
sort out the real world application of Losum.
Right.
Right? It's one thing for you guys make your plan,
Yeah.
and then we're going to figure it out in court how this actually, we're going to figure out whose rights are going to get dealt.
No, I
that
think
kind
it's
of
a-
thing.
a
So
s-
having your municipalities
Yes.
start lawyering up in preparation to help define.
Yep. It's perfect because Stewart's surrounded by water and they need
County's never going to do it. County's
No,
got the
they
west interest, and
Yep.
this little
this little town,
little
City of
gem on the
Stewart,
peninsula.
could be lawyered up, as you
Yeah.
say, to have the ability to be able to.
And maybe
Bring
that
that
presence is enough. Maybe you don't even.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to escalate at all.
Well, it's lawyers, good lawyers like that, environmental lawyers, do the research and they figure out the best way to attack this issue and who agency to attack it with. And
Right.
there have been some good cases. I mean, there have been some good organizations who have organized that. And there are good attorneys out there through Earth Justice and Everglades Law Center, for instance, who are both great groups who do a lot of this work on the environmental issues. Who have
Lisa came on.
great
here.
expertise.
She was great.
She did. Great.
Awesome.
Yeah. She's been in it for a long time and she knows the ropes and knows how to kind of get around. So we're excited about moving forward in that
It
direction.
does seem like there's a lot of that happening
Mhm.
too. Like for that case to even mention the environmental impact on the STAs.
Yep.
That
Yep.
they needed to study that. Well, true, yes. But what
What
about the river?
Yeah. What about the river?
I mean, that's a great point, but what about this? Yes, and apply that here too.
This water body needs a voice.
Yeah.
It needs a standing.
So it seems like
it
even
has to have standing.
even in those sort of
in those cases.
as those are bumping heads and that's getting sorted out, what's bubbling up is it's time.
Oh, yeah.
Is she giving you the?
Yeah. So,
All right. So
well,
with that,
it's been great.
it has, man. I
good.
really
Good
appreciate
conversation. Yeah.
you are a legend living, and to have your insight.
Well, it's good. Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
All right, Chris. Thank you for making this happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Until next time.
All right. Yeah.